In this video, I'm going to explain how I edit instrument samples. Not necessarily the best way, definitely not the only way, but this is the way that works for me. Before doing an individual sample editing, first do any processing that will apply to the whole file, such as noise reduction or high-pass filtering or EQing out bad resonances. In this case, just basic noise reduction. These kicks go from soft to hard and back in a wave, so the first thing to do is decide how many usable dynamic layers we can get out of this. Let's assume we want 4 round robins, which is generally a good number for drums. We have a bunch of hard hits with a peak around minus 12 dB and can find 4 of those and make those our top velocity layer. If you really have a lot of hits, you can analyze their peaks automatically using something like Reaper, but in this case there's not too many to eyeball. So we're going with a total of 5 velocity layers with 4 round robins in each, and the highest velocity layer will be hits with peaks around minus 12 dB. I picked them so that all the hits in the layer will be similar in peak volume. For each hit, I select the hit I want with some silence before and after the hit. These will get trimmed later. I save the selection as a new file with a name that will let me identify it and map it quickly later. So kick, then VL5 for velocity layer 5, and RR1 for first round robin. The second kick in the layer gets the same name, except with RR2 at the end, and so on. And also, just as an example of a kick from another layer, here's one kick from the quietest velocity layer, VL1. If I was doing this for real, there would be a total of 20 kick files with 5 velocity layers of 4 round robins each. The next step is to load all the individual samples we had saved and trim the start point of each. I really zoom in very closely and find the point where the drum gets hit and the waveform starts to rise with the accuracy down to the individual sample. Sure, it would be a lot quicker to let the computer automatically find the sample start, but I think this kind of accurate editing makes a big difference. I delete everything before the point I had set, save the file, and move on to the next one. The sample endings are not as critical as the starts when it comes to accuracy, but they also need to be consistent. So I look at the drum hits and find the point where the sound of the kick drum has completely faded away, and all that is left is the background noise. Again, zooming in helps. I keep maybe a half second of just background noise, then delete everything after that point. Then I gradually fade that last half second of noise away to 0, so the noise fades away smoothly. This seems like it makes no audible difference now, but it really becomes important when a producer wants to heavily compress the drums. With some instruments, quieter velocity layers will not need to be quite as long as the louder ones because the sound fades away quicker, but with kick drums there's not really a big difference. So that's drums. For something slightly different, here are a few guitar harmonic samples. With these, I don't just want the sound of the note, but also some of the sound of the pick hitting the string before the note is played. Drums don't generally have this sort of pre-hit sound, but other instruments, whether guitars or bowed strings or saxophones or whatever, sometimes will, and keeping it will make things sound more realistic. But I still want the resulting sample-based instrument to feel consistent when you play it. So after looking at a bunch of these samples, I decided to keep about 500 samples worth of pick noise. That's a little more than 1/100th of a second. So with each sample, I find where the note starts, click on the point about 500 samples before that, and delete everything before that point. Notice that these files are two channels, in this case microphone and direct signal. I will also need to make sure that the sample file starts from level 0 and doesn't suddenly jump. If I zoom in on the beginning of this file, you can see that at least one of the channels starts pretty far away from 0, so I'm going to do a very short fade in here, just a few samples, about 1/1000th of a second. This is enough to keep the start of the sample from making a quiet click sound. With that done, I can save the file and move on to the next one. Sometimes a file has some noise in the tail which we don't want. The best way to deal with it is, of course, to use a different sample that's clean. But when there isn't enough samples to do that, I will sometimes paste in just the tail from one of the other round robins and try to get that to match and fade in smoothly. In the case of this guitar, I decide I want noise as it adds character, but maybe not too much noise, so I'm going to delete this particular noisy bit. So there's still a small shift in the sound. It's not perfectly clean, but there's no big, obviously audible noise. Again, I zoom in and make sure I cut in a spot where the start of the section getting cut looks like it will match the end of the section. Basically, at the same point in the waveform cycle. After deleting that, this part of the tail will still sound like something happened to the sound, maybe the player accidentally brushed the string, but it's not a big, obvious noise. Normally, we wouldn't want this kind of noise, but with this particular guitar, it's a good thing. So, there you have it. Manual sample editing the Colorifer Samples way. Thanks for watching.